Hi, Rich Leiter here, and welcome to my channel. Okay, today I'm going to try to give a book review of The Real Life of Sebastian Knight by Vladimir Nabokov. I looked up other book reviews of this novel, and I could only find two. One of them was it was so slight it was nothing, and the other one was this long rambling, I think 2-hour review between two or three guys that were just chatting back and forth, and I didn't listen to the whole thing. That was it. There was nothing else, you know. I mean, you try to get a book review of Moby Dick or Hamlet or something, you'll get like 17 zillion book reviews. There's really nothing on this novel. So I'm going to be intrepid and try to give you whatever I can for the one or two odd readers out there who might be interested in hearing this. A little background. Vladimir Nabokov wrote both in Russian and in English. This novel, The Real Life of Sebastian Knight, was the first novel that he wrote in English. You know, like Joseph Conrad, his native tongue was a foreign one. Conrad's was Polish, and Nabokov was Russian, and they both became masters of the English language. So this novel, written in English by Nabokov, was written in 1941. First one he wrote in English. And then he wrote a novel which I did not read called Bend Sinister in 1947, 6 years later. And then he wrote in 1955, which is 8 years after Bend Sinister, he published the infamous or famous Lolita. So, okay, so let's start first of all with what The Real Life of Sebastian Knight is about. And right away, this is the main problem, because this novel basically has almost no plot. It's kind of almost an experimental novel, or I think I've heard other people say it's metafiction, which is a very self-conscious kind of novel that's very much aware that it's a fiction, that's very, very self-conscious, self-reflecting, ruminating constantly. The person who is writing it is constantly reflecting upon what kind of a job he's doing. He's talking about how he's writing it. It's not a straightforward traditional narrative, this kind of a novel. It's very, very slight in plot. Here is the plot, the bare bones of the plot. There are these two. There's this character, a fictional character. He's an author, a fictional author by the name of Sebastian Knight. And Sebastian Knight has a half-brother who was identified only by the initial V. Could this possibly V be a stand-in for Vladimir, as in Vladimir Nabokov? Possibly. So anyway, and V, and Sebastian Knight wrote, I think, 5 novels, fictitious novels in this novel, in this story by Nabokov, and in the 1920s and the 1930s, and then Sebastian Knight dies in 1936, and he has a half brother V. And what happened was, after the Russian Revolution, both of these brothers, their family, emigrated, escaped from Russia, and they moved to Europe. Sebastian Knight primarily lived in London. He was educated in Cambridge, lived in London most of the time, and his brother, I think, in Paris. And so they kind of, dart around the continent: Paris, Germany, London, England. Paris seems to be a very, very frequent continental stop for these Russian emigres. And so anyway, now V, the half-brother, decides 2 months after the death of his brother, the novelist, to write a biography of him. I mean, V did not know his brother very well. His brother was his half-brother very well. His half-brother was kind of a very aloof, a remote figure. They would meet sporadically once every couple of years, apparently in Paris or some other place, and they would chat. But it was all very perfunctory, and V never really got to know his brother very well. And now that his brother is deceased, he is burning to write a biography of him. He knows all of his brother's works, fictional works, novels. He's a novelist, knows them by heart. He's very intimately aware of them, and he wants to set the record straight about the real life of his brother. And that is basically the bare bones of the plot. It's not much of a plot. The novel is told mostly in flashbacks, in memories of V, about his half-brother and about his half-brother's acquaintances and friends and lovers and so on. You never get to meet Sebastian Knight because he's dead by this time. There's no real scene involving Sebastian Knight. So the reader is being asked to take an interest in a fictional character who is an author who they never really get to meet. It's all filtered through the eyes of his half-brother. That's the bare bones of it, not much. And there are a lot of episodes in the novel where V is running around all over the continent tracing possible leads, possible associates or friends of Sebastian Knight who will be able to fill in the gaps and tell him, give V tidbits or bits of information, useful information that he can put in his definitive biography of his brother. And there are all sorts of episodes. Some of them are quite amusing. For instance, towards the end of the novel, V tries to track down his brother's last mistress or lover. And it's kind of amusing. It's a long, protracted, amusing episode. He knows that his brother's last mistress was Russian, and he goes to the sanatorium where his brother had been staying. His brother suffers from heart disease. And he tries to compile a list of all the Russian women who have been in the sanatorium at the same time that his brother was. And we go through this whole thing, and he narrows it down, and he actually does find out who the mistress was. And so there are many episodes of this, of him interviewing people who knew his brother. This is it. This is the entire plot. Now, his brother is... From what we know of Sebastian Knight, Sebastian Knight is a very, very aloof person. He's a very remote person. He treats people in a very perfunctory manner. He treats women, his girlfriends, his lovers, in a very perfunctory manner. You really don't get to... He really doesn't, like people getting to know him. He's very casual in his acquaintances. He'll go to a party, and in the middle of it, he'll just leave, according to his brother. He has no business sense at all. He doesn't really keep track of his publishers and business affairs and finances. He leaves that to one of his girlfriends or one of his lovers to take care of. So in a way, he's kind of this brilliant... up in the clouds, ivory tower type of author. He's kind of snobby. He's kind of an elitist. Based upon, again, this is all based upon what V says, his half brother. We have to take him at face value. He's a very remote person, and that's basically what you know about V. And again, since we don't have it straight from the horse's mouth, we don't really know just how... his half-brother is convinced that Sebastian Knight is just this great, great novelist. And we don't really know if that's true or not. Again, it's all being filtered through his half-brother, who idolizes him. Is he a great novelist? Is he a good novelist? Is he a boring novelist? We really don't know. Hold on a sec. And all throughout the reading of this novel, one can't help but thinking, or I couldn't help but think, that maybe Sebastian Knight is really Vladimir Nabokov. It's his alter ego, or it's really when the half-brother talks about Sebastian Knight's novels and the meanings of them and the contents and the style of them and all of these literary considerations and speculations. You know, I mean, you can't help but wonder, is Vladimir Nabokov really talking about himself? And is he just getting, is part of his reason, his impetus for writing this novel, so that he can really talk about himself in kind of an indirect way? It would appear to be, to me, to at least some extent. That's open for discussion. So, if you're looking for a plot-driven novel, if you're looking for great expectations, you're not going to get it with Sebastian Knight. You might as well stop before you even open the book. You're going to be very disappointed. This is one of these works of fiction which is not a page-turner. It's not like a sci-fi novel and you can't wait to find out what happens when they leave Planet X. What happens next? Do they meet the monster? Do they meet new spacemen? Are they whirled into space and swallowed up by a black hole? It's not that kind of a novel. You have to read this novel slowly. You can't rush it. If you rush it, that's it. You're going to miss everything. It requires your undivided attention with every single sentence. You can't gloss over everything. So you have to be aware of that when you read this kind of a novel. You have to be really committed to it. It's either that or it's nothing. In a way, you know, Vladimir Nabokov, I listened to an interview that he conducted once on the internet, and he was talking about the novelist that he seems to admire the most, or one of them, Kafka, he's really crazy about, but he also really loved Proust, Marcel Proust. And he says very, very disparaging things about Thomas Mann. He thinks that Thomas Mann is mediocre, is a mediocrity. Doesn't go into why, but I definitely heard that in this interview. He's very disparaging of him. And the funny thing about it is, that this novel, Sebastian Knight, is so full of rumination and speculation and intense thought and reflections all throughout it. I couldn't help but thinking, even though he doesn't like Mann, I couldn't help but thinking of Thomas Mann. Thomas Mann and Vladimir Nabokov seem to share the same exquisite aesthetic sensibility. They are both like seismographs. They can go into the most minute, seemingly superficial things with great subtlety. They don't miss a trick, especially Nabokov. He doesn't miss a trick. His mind is like a steel trap. And I was thinking, you know, you have to read this novel the same way that you would read Death in Venice comes to mind. I know I read that recently. Or Stories of 3 Decades. Death in Venice is not really plot-driven. Let's face it. This artist comes to Venice for a holiday. He becomes infatuated with this 12 or 13-year-old boy at the Lido. And the rest of the novel is just his following the kid around and obsessing about him. Of course, you have the backdrop of the cholera epidemic in Venice. But basically, that's it. It's speculations and the ruminations about the nature of art, philosophical ruminations that the main character Gustav von Aschenbach makes and the narrator makes. So there are. It's completely. an internal sort of cerebral thing for the most part. There's very little plot, and you can't skip over any of Death in Venice either. It's a novella. It's not as long as Sebastian Knight is, but you can't skip anything. If you decide to skip anything, well, you might as well skip the whole thing. That's exactly what I felt about Sebastian Knight. It's all about the style. It's all about the style, about the sensibility of the writer. Excuse me for just 1 second. And here's the thing about Nabokov and Mann, both of them. Mann's forte is the artist, the artistic sensibility. And so is Nabokov's. Nabokov gravitates towards the kinds of personalities which are obsessive, which are perverse, which are artistic, which are literary, which are extremely cultured. This is his forte, the very, very sort of odd, strange, but brilliant character is what he gravitates towards. You're not going to get in Nabokov, you're not going to get a lot of discussion about does God exist or morality. You're not like in Dostoevsky or in Tolstoy, not at all. He's not into that. If you want the meaning of life, he's not trying to crack it for you in that way. Nabokov, he just gravitates towards telling a story about these kind of weird, twisted, perverse people. And I like that. I like that very much. You could certainly see his affinity for Marcel Proust, Swann's Way, which is full of just sweeping, soaring, internal ruminations and speculations, very little external stuff. Take a character like Humbert Humbert in Lolita. Now, Humbert is not an artist. He's not a writer, but he would like to be. He's a teacher. He's a literature teacher. So his sensibilities are very artistic in a very twisted, perverse, cynical way. He's extremely witty. This is the kind of character that Nabokov locks in on. And in this Sebastian Knight, well, he's an artist. He's very literary. He's very elitist, defeatist, a snob. He has very brilliant insights. He's not mainstream, okay? So I have noticed that about Nabokov, and I intend to read more of him because I like this very much, just like I like it in Thomas Mann. Now, the writing style, like I say, when Nabokov can write these really just exquisitely brilliant sentences, he has an insight, or he expresses an insight in a refreshing, novel way, sometimes, which is he hits the ball out of the ballpark. He has these little gems every once in a while in the way he expresses an idea or even a description of a person. However, in Sebastian Knight, at least, I found a lot of the passages to be hard to read. They were just kind of dull to me. He packs so much information into his sentences, so much detail, and some of these sentences are so long, you have to read them a couple of times to remember what the beginning of the sentence was. And sometimes I didn't find anything that great about it. For instance, he has this long, this is near the end of the novel, the half-brother, is in a train, and he has a dream, and he wakes up, and he describes the dream to us. And the dream goes on for about a page and a half, and I could have done without this dream. It seemed very arbitrary to me. All of the elements of the dream seemed kind of arbitrary. I mean, if there was an armchair in this dream, if Nabokov had decided to put a black cat in instead of an armchair, or a red sofa instead of a writing table, it wouldn't have made any difference to me. It's just a dream that this particular character had, and why should I be that interested in it? It wasn't that interesting to me. So he talks about his brother Sebastian Knight's books. He summarizes the themes or the ideas in some of his books. He goes on, he's like he interprets his brother's work, which he thinks so highly of. And you have to take it at face value, because you don't know whether his regard for his brother's literary worth is overinflated or not. You have to take him at his word. Sometimes he goes on for a page and a half about one or two of his brother's books, dissecting them, analyzing them, telling us what's so great about them. And again, they were described to us in a very abstract way, a little bit boring to me, and a little bit self-indulgent too. I mean, remember, you and I, we're just readers. Nabokov doesn't know us, V doesn't know us, and we're being asked to drop everything and to suddenly take this all-consuming interest in this fictitious author Sebastian Knight, who we really know nothing about directly at all. It's a little bit self-indulgent, and there's no plot to sort of draw us in. It's asking a little bit much of the reader to do that, and I did get this feeling throughout the bulk of the novel that, brilliant as it was just a little bit self-indulgent to enter into the world of this half-brother who wants to write a biography of his brother because he thinks that his brother's books are so great. I don't know. I felt that way a lot as I was reading this book. So that's it. Lastly, what is the takeaway from this book? Did I have any great takeaway from it? Well, I found out that I didn't really have a definitive knowledge of Sebastian Knight by reading this book. I did not get to know the real Sebastian Knight. I only got to know Sebastian Knight through the eyes of his brother. At the end of the book, the half-brother, does have a kind of a revelation in the last 5, I won't give it away, in the last 5 pages, which kind of mitigates this unknowing definitively about what his brother was really like. But it's kind of like trying to know the real life of Sebastian Knight is like chasing after a ghost. It was intriguing at times. It was boring at times. It was brilliant at times. So I had very mixed feelings about reading this book. Probably not going to read it again. I might, but I probably don't think I'm going to. I think I do definitely want to read a few more of Nabokov's books, however. I mean, I just like his gravitation towards these peculiar characters. And his writing style is, after all, brilliant. It's exquisite, his sensibility. If I could write a paragraph like Nabokov, I'd be pretty happy about it. But that's it. That's the best I can do with giving a review of Sebastian Knight. That's it. So thanks a lot.